Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Waring of Full Moon Wares. Thank you so much for joining me and crafting along with my Let's Make Spun Cotton Mushrooms tutorial. In this video, you will learn traditional techniques as well as some that I've developed to create your own charming antique-inspired mushrooms. If you'll be crafting along with this video, you can find these specially curated kits as well as my other kits and tutorials in my shop, which is fullmoonwares.bigcartel.com. Each mushroom kit contains specially sourced and handmade items and enough material to allow you to make 6 spun cotton mushrooms just like we'll be making today. Now I'm going to walk you through the contents of the kit. To make the mushroom stems, we'll start with these 6-inch long, 1/8 inch wide cotton pipe cleaners, and we'll be covering them with white cotton sliver. For the mushroom caps, we'll begin with the base of the 35mm spun cotton hemispheres, and we'll be covering them with some hand-dyed cotton. This is organic cotton fill that I've hand-dyed in 3 different colors for this kit. We have antique red, chocolate brown, and taupe. And this cotton will come inside of a muslin storage pouch. For the gills of our mushrooms, we'll be using this handmade cream crepe ruffle. It's 1.5 inches wide. The kit also contains a recipe card on how to make potato starch glue, which we'll be using throughout the process, as well as a vial of potato starch. For painting and embellishing the mushrooms, I've included a small round rubber stamp, which will help you stamp the spots on your mushroom caps. For aging and antiquing, there's a little vial of instant coffee granules. And next to that, I have a vial of mica and glass glitter blend, which will allow you to add a nice frosty finish to your mushrooms. Each kit comes with 2 different colors of ribbon. These are hand-dyed 1/4 inch wide silk ribbons in 2 colors. So we have a silvery green ombre and a pewter ombre. To make the tags on the mushrooms, I've included some cotton felt that I handmade, as well as 6 bronze 1/2 inch long push pins. And lastly, if you'd like to give your mushrooms a nice mossy base like this one here, I've included some faux cotton moss. That's everything that comes in the kit. Now let's get started. This is step 1, and in this step, we'll be making the gills for our mushrooms. To make the gills for these mushrooms, I've decided to use a piece of crepe paper ruffle. Specifically, we have a 1.5 inch wide piece of cream colored vintage crepe paper ruffle. And this is made by gathering crepe paper strips on your sewing machine. This is what a whole big piece of it looks like rolled up. I think this is about 5 yards here. And you can see it's just really beautiful. And it does look quite a bit like mushroom gills. And to make 1 mushroom, we're going to need to cut this into 2.5 inch pieces. So we need 2.5 inches per mushroom. 2.5 inches is a little bit more than we're actually going to need, so we probably will be trimming just a tad off, but it's easier to work with a slightly longer piece and then trim it. So I'm going to get this out of the way. And this is kind of a 2-step process. So in the first part, we're going to be applying the crepe paper to the bottom of the hemisphere with our hot glue gun. And then we'll be folding it up and securing it with white glue. And this is what the finished piece will look like at the end of this step. Okay, so we're going to start by doing this. This is our 35mm spun cotton hemisphere. And this is where we're going to attach the gills. The first thing we need to do is to fold them in half. Just give it a nice crisp fold. And I have my hot glue gun next to me warming up I also have a clay needle, which I like to use when I'm working with hot glue so I can hold it in place instead of using my fingers. You might like to do this as well to help keep from burning yourself. So I'm going to keep that just in case I want to use it. And we're going to first start by putting a dab of glue at about 12 o'clock on the hemisphere here. And I'm just going to go straight towards the edge with a little bit of glue. And we're going to attach this right next to the opening. And if you want, you can hold it in place with this or something similar to this. Now we're going to sort of train the crepe ruffle into the shape we want before we glue it down the rest of the way. Try to get rid of any little strings. So you can see I'm kind of holding it down with my thumb here, close to the opening and rolling it around. Right, and you can see when you get to the other side that you're going to have a little bit of extra. You want to keep it right next to the opening. You will be inserting the stem here, but if it's not close enough to the opening, you'll have a gap where you can see the cotton shape underneath. Okay, so we have a little bit of extra. You can cut it off now or after, or a little bit of both. I'm going to trim some right now. Now that we've kind of shaped it into the gill shape, I'm going to do a little bit more hot glue. There we are. Just kind of cover the whole thing. And quickly, so the hot glue doesn't set. Here we are. You don't want to pull it too tight because then you'll lose those folds. So I try to kind of gather it as I'm applying it. And again, it looks like I have a little bit more than I need. I'm going to trim that off too. And use just a little bit more hot glue at the end. Just hold that until it sets. And then get rid of all those strings. Right, so this is the first part of it. And don't worry if you have a little piece folding up like that, we can put that down with the white glue. So now we're going to be using white glue or school glue, PVA glue, depending on where you live. This is the glue right out of the bottle, but I did then add a tiny bit of water just to make it a little bit easier to apply. So this is probably about 4 parts of glue to 1 part of water. It's just a really kind of a thicker glue wash. If you put too much water in, it will kind of dissolve the crepe paper. So you want to keep it quite a strong glue wash. Now, the first thing that I'll do is kind of fold this down and apply a little bit right along the edge. All right, brush that off. Now I'm going to go back and just do, you can see there's 2 layers of the crepe ruffle, but I'm going to do the first layer. And make sure you apply sort of a firm pressure so you're adhering the crepe paper to the cotton hemisphere. You don't want to do it too forcefully though, because the crepe paper will rip really easily. It is delicate. Just want to give it enough pressure that you do lay it down. All right, so now here's the second layer. I'm just going to go back and do the same thing. And I'm going all in the same direction. That way I'm not going to disturb the ruffle. Again, you want to try to maintain the ruffle so it will look like gills. All right, and just a little more. Make sure you have it all secure. Sometimes it helps me to check at the top. We are going to be covering this with cotton in a later step, but I like to try to get it nice and tight to the hemisphere. All right, so once you've done this, you can set it aside. I have a drying tray ready here. This is just an enamel tray with a piece of parchment paper on it, so it's non-stick. And set it aside and let it dry completely. Once these have dried, you will be ready to go on to the next step. But for now, this is the end of step 1. This is step 2, and in this step, we'll be applying the cotton to our mushroom caps. At the end of the step, you'll have something that looks like this. So this is the 35mm half ball with the gills that we prepared in the last step. It's completely dry. And then for this one, I've applied the pre-dyed cotton that came in the kit and dried that as well. And now I'm going to show you how to do that. For this step, I have a few different types of glue. This is the white glue wash that we used in the last step. So it's just slightly watered down white glue again. And then here I have potato starch glue that was made with the recipe card that came in the kit. And this is the same potato starch glue that I've added a little bit of instant coffee granules to and then dissolve them into it. So this has kind of a brown tinge to it. And if you like an antique look on your pieces and you're using the potato starch glue, I find that adding a little bit of coffee or tea instead of water when you're making it, or just sprinkling in some instant coffee granules, will give you this glue that will provide almost a patina as you're applying it. So you can see here what I mean. I've used the coffee glue for this, and you can see how the coffee changes the color of the red. So this is what it looks like. And then I'm applying it with the coffee starch glue mixture, and that'll sort of age it as you go. You can always go back and add some more coffee and antiquing later. But if you know you want that antique look to begin with, you're going to want to start with this type of starch glue. So just sprinkle a little bit of coffee granules in, not much, just start with a few and then add more until you get a color about like this. You can see even on the stem, I use that same thing, what that looks like. All right. Now to get started on this step, we're going to need one of the bamboo skewers. And this is what we prepared in the last step. The bamboo skewers fit right inside of there securely. So to get it ready for applying the cotton, you're going to want to secure it on the bamboo skewer. Don't push it all the way through the mushroom cap, but you want to get it in there so it doesn't spin on the skewer. It's nice and secure. Now there's 3 different colors of cotton that came in the kit. We have this kind of chocolatey brown. There is a taupe color that I really like, and also red, which is a more traditional Christmas color. And I'm going to be using the red today to demonstrate. So this is cotton that I've pre-dyed with RIT dye, and it's an organic cotton fill. So something that you would use to fill a pillow or a plush animal. And you can see that it comes off in kind of sheets. So what we're going to do is rip a little piece of this into the shape of this mushroom cap, and then we're going to be applying it first with the white glue and then some of the starch glue to secure it and finish it. So I'm going to take a piece and make a nice thin sheet with it to start. Not too thin, you don't really want to see through it. But right now we're just looking to get sort of a base coat of cotton down. So this is probably 2 or 3 coats that are patched in. So we're going to start first by making a nice base coat. And I'm going to shape it into a circle, just a rough circle, about the size that I know I'm going to need. You can test it out on your mushroom cap and look for the side that you prefer. Some of them might be a little more wrinkled. Some of them have color variations on it. It's all hand dyed, so the cotton does vary. And before we add any glue, I'm going to place it on top of the mushroom cap and sort of secure it and make sure I have a good size that's covering everywhere on the cotton. Okay, so once we have a piece about like that, we're going to start with this glue. So that's the slightly watered down white glue again. And I like to use this as a base coat when I'm applying cotton to a cotton shape. So we're going to give that a nice coat. Don't overdo it along the edges because you don't want it to start coming out the bottom, but do get it right up against the edges. Just make sure that it's not a blob down there. If you get a lot of glue down there, the cotton will start to stick underneath and you want to keep the gills exposed. All right. You don't need too thick of a coating there. There we go. And I'm going to take that piece that we got ready, put it back on, and really you can start by doing kind of a lot with your hands here. Now you'll see there's a lot hanging down there. Don't worry about that right now. Don't try to tear it off because then it'll leave holes in your cotton. It'll start to thin it out in areas, and we're going to cut it off later. So I'm going to use the coffee starch glue for this. I like the antique look. And I start at the top And I'm kind of going around from the top to the edge and wetting it enough that it's soaking through the cotton and it's adhering to the cotton shape underneath. You can use your brush to sort of pat it down. The brushes that I'm using today are filbert tip brushes, ranging from size 10, I believe this one is, to size 12. I like to use these wide flat brushes to apply the glue wash to my spun cotton. All right, so you'll notice I'm not going all the way across. That will drag the cotton off. I like to start in the center and work my way out. And I always say that's sort of like a sunburst or a starburst pattern, working my way out from the center and securing it along the edges, making sure that it really soaks through along the edges at the bottom of the hemisphere. You can see where the hemisphere ends, and we're going to cut that off in just a moment. Okay, you do want to make sure you go all the way to the bottom so your cap is totally covered. Now, once you have your first coat on, you can have a look at it and you can see the cotton was thicker here, so you can see how dark it is. And then there's some areas where you can see the shape of the hemisphere, the white coming through. So that would be where you want to apply a little bit more. So all you need to do there is just take a little bit and just patch it on. Sometimes you don't need to do this. You might have gotten really good coverage on your first piece. But if you didn't, you can go ahead and add a little bit more like this. I think I'm going to add another piece there. And another thing I'll mention about this is if you wanted to build yours up to maybe like a more of a cone shaped mushroom, you can add more and you can change the shape with this by just applying more pieces and layers and sculpting it as you go. So you can change the shape of your mushroom cap by adding more cotton in certain areas if you like. All right, so I'm going to make sure that's nice and secure. You'll be able to tell if it's saturated through. You can see that the glue wash has completely gone through. There aren't any kind of lofty air bubble pockets. And when you have that, you know that it's finished. All right. Now I like to cut it off now. You could dry it first and then cut it off, but I find you get a better finish if you cut it off while it's still wet. So I'm sort of folding the edges out a little bit so I can see where the wet cotton ends. And I'm just going to use these little tiny embroidery scissors and start snipping it away. You can see what that looks like. Just follow the edge of your mushroom. If you like more gills exposed, cut it up higher. If you like less, you could cut it down lower. And we're going to trim this away. If there's any little stringy bits left as you're doing this, don't pull on them while it's wet. Wait for it to dry and then cut them off. If you pull on any of this dry cotton, there's really a chance that you're going to disturb the rest of the cotton and pull it off or get some folds or bubbles in it. And you don't want to have that. So if there's something you really don't like, you can wait for it to dry and cut it off the rest of the way if you can't get it while it's wet. Okay. And the edge doesn't have to be perfect. This one is about ready. Typically, I like to dry my spun cotton pieces in my kitchen oven at 225 degrees. But since these do have hot glue on the gills, that would melt the hot glue and disturb the gills. They would start to lift up. So if you do want to dry it in your oven to speed it up, I wouldn't go above 150 if your oven goes that low, maybe 175. You could also put it in a food dehydrator to speed up the process. You can blow it with a hair dryer and just aim it towards the wet cotton on the top and not the gills, or put it on top of a heat vent or something else that's blowing air. Even in front of a fan works to speed it up. I don't like to wait around, so I'm going to put mine in my kitchen oven at a low setting of 150 degrees. And to dry it, I like to stand it upright in a cup that's oven proof, and you can put it right on your drying tray or on a cookie sheet. Put it in your oven like this until it's completely dry, and then your mushroom cap will be ready for the next step. This is step 3, and in this step, we'll be spinning our mushroom stems. At the end of the step, you'll have something that looks like this. This is a completed mushroom stem, which is made by spinning the white cotton sliver onto a cotton pipe cleaner, coating it with glue wash, and then drying it. And here are a few others that I've done. You can see they all vary a little bit in shape and size. We're working with natural materials here, so nothing really ever turns out exactly alike. This one on the end is a little bit of a different style. If you prefer to make a longer, thinner stem, you could do something like this. But today I'm going to show you how to make this style of mushroom stem. To get started with that, we're going to need a 3-foot long piece of cotton sliver. So this is the cotton sliver that came in the kit. It's white cotton that's been cleaned and combed into a loose rope-like shape. And this is the type of cotton that I use for the spinning part of spun cotton. You can see something like these icicles here. They're made with the white cotton roving and the same spinning technique. For each mushroom, you're going to need a piece of cotton that's 3 feet long, but only 1/3 the width of the original rope. So this is a 3-foot long strand of the cotton sliver. And now I'm going to divide that into narrower thirds. I'm going to start at the top, gently coax it apart, and try to make 3 equal strands if possible. They're never going to be completely the same, and that's why all the stems look a bit different, but you don't really have to worry about that. You can also add cotton if your stem doesn't turn out to be wide enough because your strand was too narrow. You could just add a little bit more cotton if you like. All right, so I'm going to gently coax this away and try to keep it the same width all the way down. I like to use 3-foot strands. It's just easier to work with than a longer piece. And 3 feet is pretty much going to be the perfect amount for these mushrooms. Okay. So here's a strand that we're going to work with now. If you're going to make all 6 of your mushrooms right now, I would definitely recommend preparing all of your cotton ahead of time, because once you start working with the glue wash, the cotton will really stick to your hands, and you don't want to have to be separating strands of cotton while you're going back and forth with the glue wash and the cotton. It's just going to be a mess then. So this is one strand. If you like, you can kind of run it gently through your hands with the direction that the fibers are combed and kind of secure any flyaways. Okay, so that piece is ready. Now we also are going to need a pipe cleaner, and this is a 1/8 inch wide cotton pipe cleaner that's 6 inches long. You don't need the entire 6 inches, but I like to keep it as the 6-inch length because this will act as a handle when you're working on your piece and you're spinning it. You're going to need something to hold on to. You couldn't work with a piece that was that small. It would be really uncomfortable and difficult to work with. So I like to leave this piece on, and it's just going to be the handle as we work with it. To make the mushrooms in the style that I've showed you today, you're going to need to measure out 1.5 inches on the pipe cleaner here. So I like to use a fine tip Sharpie for this and mark it kind of all the way around so I can see it on all sides as I'm spinning it, just so I know where to end the cotton. All right, when I'm done with that, I'll get rid of the ruler. And now we're ready to go. I'm going to put this one here for reference. You can see that the narrow end is going to be here, and then this is the base of the mushroom. This is definitely going to be the most difficult part of this project. So if you haven't tried this before, you may want to practice a little bit. It might take a few turns to get used to it and to get the feel of it, but I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible for you. So I'm right-handed. I'm going to keep my cotton on the right side, and then I have my pipe cleaner or wire, whatever you're going to spin onto. In this case, it's the cotton-covered pipe cleaner in my left hand. And with my left hand, I'm going to be spinning the pipe cleaner, while with my right hand, I'm feeding the cotton onto the wire and then applying a gentle pressure with my fingers to adhere it to the wire. So this is my spinning hand, and this is sort of the feeding and sculpting hand. And before I add the cotton to the wire, I like to just put a little bit of glue. That does help the cotton, the first layer, to stick a little bit. When I'm working with the cotton, I'm going to be adding some starch glue as I spin. It does help to secure your layers. You don't have to do that. You could spin it completely dry and put some starch glue at the end, but I do find it helpful to add it as you go. If you don't have starch glue, you could use a white glue wash, which is much thinner than this one. And to make that, you'd want to use 4 parts of hot water and 1 part of white glue and give it a nice stir until it's completely homogenized. And you can use a white glue wash rather than the starch glue. The benefit of the starch glue for something like this is while you're working with it, it's not going to dry and become sticky the same way that white glue would. So it is a little bit easier to work with the starch glue. Plus, it's the traditional glue for spun cotton. If you want to stick to tradition, you can prepare a starch glue. And in my case, I'm going to be using the starch glue with a little bit of coffee in it because I do like the antique look. If you want a cleaner, brighter mushroom, you can use the plain starch glue or white glue wash. So now I'm going to get started with the spinning. And you'll notice that when I apply the cotton, I'm going to apply it in a wide, flat ribbon rather than twisted. If it was twisted in kind of a rope or a coil, it would go on and create ridges. And we want it to have a nice smooth finish. So I'm going to try to maintain sort of a wide, flat ribbon as the cotton applies to the pipe cleaner. And to do that, you're just going to need to sometimes untwist it as you're working with it. So I applied the white glue and I put the cotton right where the mark is that we made. That's going to be the narrow end of the mushroom stem. And with this hand, I'm going to start spinning while I'm feeding the cotton onto the wire. And to achieve the tapered look, you're going to hold the cotton at an angle. If you're spinning in the same place without holding it at an angle, it's just going to stay there and build up and get thicker and thicker. If you want to taper something, you do that by changing the angle up. So I'm going to start at the top with kind of a more severe angle. You can see what I mean, rather than holding it like this. So with this hand, I'm spinning, and with these fingers, I am pinching it and applying a gentle pressure to adhere the cotton to the pipe cleaner. And since we do have the glue there, it is helping to adhere it. So I'm twisting and traveling down the wire, and I'm going to decrease the severity of the angle as I get closer to the end. When you get to the end, it may help you to add a little bit of glue wash or starch glue. Don't worry about the fuzzy end so much at the end. We're going to secure all that. I'll show you how to do that later. So if you have some fuzz sticking off right now, it's not a big deal. Then we're going to turn around and go back the other direction. So I change the angle. And keeping in mind that the end is going to be wider if you're making this shape of mushroom stem. So you want to spin around more times here at less of an angle than you would at the top. I'm going towards the top. Now I'm going to apply a little bit more starch glue. And you can do this as needed or as you prefer. You don't have to do it at all, and you could spin it totally dry, but I find it does help to add some as you go. So I'm switching the angle, going back the other direction, and I'm going to spin it around kind of a few more times as I get towards the bottom. You can see how that's starting to add the shape. Now, before I go back up, I think I'm going to add just a dab of starch glue. I'm going to go around again and then change the angle to the other direction. My rope is twisted, so I'm going to untwist that a bit. And going back towards the top. You might want to add more glue now. You don't have to, but I'm going to. And I'm going to go back the other way one more time. You can see that this is close to what it's going to look like when it's finished up at the top there. And now I'm at the bottom. I'm going to start widening it up by going around a few more times. You don't want to go around too many times in the same spot because then you'll have kind of a jump from that to that, and you want to have a smooth transition. So you kind of just have to play around with the angles and the pressure in order to taper it. If you just want to make a stem that's the same width all the way up and down, you can do that too. This is a slightly more advanced stem than something like this. It would be a little easier because you aren't switching the angles up so much. think at this point I'm going to add a little more glue. And you can see I'm not adding it everywhere. If I add it here, it sort of will start to blend into the rest of it as I spin. Okay, so this is about as wide as I want the top to be. And now I'm going to show you something else. So this part is as wide as it needs to be. If you like, you can tug a little bit on the cotton to make sure it stays nice and thin in this area. You can thin the cotton out a little bit so it'll apply a little bit less by just gently tugging. So that's a thinner piece than it would be if I hadn't tugged. That way it is nice and smooth in the transition. Okay, I'm going down towards the bottom again. If you get any bumps or ridges, don't worry, we can kind of fix that. I'll show you what to do. All right. And that's the end. And now I'm going to tug a little bit because I went around a few times there. I don't want this to be kind of like a shelf or a ledge. I'm tugging a little bit right there again, going back this way. All right. You'll notice this shape is not as refined as this, and I'm going to show you how to sculpt it a little bit more. I'm going to tear that off. I don't think I need that last little bit. And when I did that, I had this pointer finger here holding the cotton in place. I didn't just tear like that because then it would start to unravel. Holding it down like that, you can tug a little bit away so your end is thinned out. And when you add this, it'll help to blend it in. All right. Now this is what it looks like after we spun it on. It's a little bit bumpy and lumpy, and you can start to correct that by just spinning it in your hand. It's dry right now. I don't have any of the glue wash on. Before I add any more glue wash, I'm going to spin it in my hand, just giving it something for the cotton to press against and secure it. You can see that changed the shape of it somewhat. And now I'm going to add some more of the glue. Might help you to put it down right on your work surface at this point. I want to get it kind of nice and saturated, a good coating here. Okay, and once you've done this, you can further shape and refine it in your fingers. Sometimes it helps me to put a little bit on this finger to grip onto the pipe cleaner too. It'll get a little slippery, and that's just a little trick I like to do is get a little starch glue on my fingers, and it'll help provide some traction there. And you can see I kind of have a bump here. If I want to smooth that out a little bit, I'm going to apply a little bit more pressure there and in my hand. So this is about finished. I'm going to add a little bit more glue, and I'm just going to show you if you didn't like a certain area of your mushroom stem, say you wanted to add a little more cotton, you absolutely can. If it wasn't as wide as you want it to be, you can pick up some more cotton and as long as you need and apply it just like this. The same thing goes if your cotton sliver rope rips as you're working on your stem or as you're spinning it, you can just pick it back up, make sure it's wet, and then apply it. You can kind of build it up like this at the end as well. If you want to add more, there's a piece here I can add. You can fill in any gaps that you may have gotten like that. That's a way to correct anything that you might not like and a way to further refine the shape. And I'm going to add a little more of the starch glue, blend that in, spin it again. You can really change it a lot by just applying the pressure with your fingers. Okay. So for the end here, to finish this off, I'm going to put some at the end. And to get this nice flat bottom that you see on this one, I like to put it on the table and kind of press down a little bit. And that'll help. If you like that really flat bottom, that's how you achieve that. Some of the other ones, like this one, I didn't do that. It's more rounded, but if you want to get that nice flat bottom, you can press it with your finger too, but I like to put it on the table and spin. Okay. So once your mushroom stem is completely spun and you're happy with the shape of it and you've applied the glue wash, you're going to need to dry it. And to dry this, I'm going to use the cup again. This is an oven-proof glass. Dry it upright like this at 225 degrees in my kitchen oven For something like this, it's probably going to take about 5 to 10 minutes to dry because there is several layers of glue wash throughout the cotton. It's not just on the outside. If it were just on the outside, it would only take a few moments. But since we were using it as we spun, it's probably going to take about 5 to 10 minutes if you're using your kitchen oven at 225 degrees. You can also just set it on the counter and let it dry naturally. Place it in any warm environment outside in the sunshine if you have that where you live. Just really whatever method you prefer. But for me, since I like to speed it up, I'm going to go 225 in my kitchen oven until it's completely dry, and then the stem will be ready for the next step. This is step 4, and in this step, we're going to be building our mushrooms and then painting them. So here I have the dried stem that we made in the last step, and then the dried cap that we made earlier on. And now we're going to need to put both these pieces together to make the mushroom. So I'm going to take the skewer out, and then for the mushroom stem, we're going to need to trim off this handle that we've left on there. And I'm going to leave about 1/4 of an inch of the pipe cleaner to insert into the mushroom cap. So I just use a little wire cutter to cut that off. Now I'm going to test it out and see. I think that looks like a good length. If you left a little bit too much pipe cleaner and your stem isn't quite all the way in, you can just trim a little bit more off. So I leave a little bit more at first just to make sure that I have enough to secure into the cap, and then you can always trim more off if you didn't get quite enough. So I like the look of that. Now I'm just going to use the hot glue again and put the tip of the hot glue gun right into the opening on the cap. You don't want to use too much because then it'll start to come out the bottom and look a bit messy. And now we just put that right in there and press that until it sets. Okay, so here is a mushroom. You could absolutely leave it like this, but now I'm going to show you how I like to antique and paint them. So here are a few different options for finished mushrooms. These are some that I did with the red, and these are all antiqued, and then I painted the small red spots. Here are some of the taupe and then the darker brown mushrooms. Some of them I've left plain, and some of them I've decided to paint spots on. But I did add coffee wash to all of them. If you like larger spots, like you can see with this guy here, this is an antique stiff mouse, and I've attached a mushroom to him. This is one that I made a longer stem with. I just used a pin to attach it. And then the spots on this mushroom are made with the end of a hot glue stick. So you use that as sort of a stamp, and that can make a larger style spot if you like. In the kit, if you got the kit, you have this to make the smaller spots, and this is an eraser from a mechanical pencil. So it's a mechanical pencil eraser refill. You can paint the spots by hand with a paintbrush, but I like to use anything that's round as a stamp. It just works to make it a little bit more uniform and neat. So if you like the look of the larger spots, that's an option as well. To paint the spots on the mushrooms, I have a little bit of white acrylic paint here on this plate, and I also have some coffee. I just put a tiny little bit next to my paint, and I still have the potato starch glue with the coffee here, and then I have some water, some warm water in this one, and I have a little bit of paper towel in case I need that. I'm going to start by putting some water and just taking a little bit of the white paint into it and watering it down. And then I'll take a little bit of coffee, mix that in, and start to get a watery tan mixture of the paint and the coffee. And once I get something like that, that's about the consistency that I like for stamping the spots. I like when the spots are a little bit more transparent and not so uniform. If you like, before you paint your spots, you can start by adding a little bit of coffee to your mushroom too. So I'm going to use my starch glue here, and I'm getting some of the coffee granules, and you can add more coffee. You can use the starch glue or the water. I like to go along the edge here where the mushroom cap ends and meets the gills, and really anywhere you want to antique it a bit. Sometimes I like to put it on the base of the stem. That's where it would be in the soil. And you just use as little or as much of this as you like. If you like a more grungy antique look, you want to add more. You can keep working with the coffee and some water, just adding a little bit. You can make a coffee mixture instead of using plain water. You could just use coffee to paint with, but I like to do it like this. This is why I really like the instant coffee granules, because you can control the level of coffee. So I make this big mess and then it turns out to look good in the end. We've got a little bit there. If you want it a little bit thicker, you can add the starch glue. That kind of makes like a little paste almost. All right. I'm going to put a little more up there. And I think I like the way that looks. If you put a little bit too much, you can wipe it off with your fingers. You can also put some on the gills. And I find when you mix it with the starch glue, it's good for the gills. If you use the straight water on the crepe paper, it can tear it. So the starch glue is a little bit easier to use on the crepe paper. This is the part where I mostly like to put the most coffee. Okay. So I think that is ready for the spots. I'm going to go back to that coffee and paint mixture that I made. And now I'm going to pick up my little stamp and just put it in there. If you want to practice first by dotting it on a piece of paper, you can. This is parchment paper, so it's not really going to show up the same way, but I'm going to dot it on my little plate. And then just decide where you like them. If you have a spot on your mushroom that you weren't happy with, maybe you didn't get enough red cotton there or whatever color you used, you can cover it up by painting a spot. So just distribute them however you like. And I like to do it when my cap is a little bit wet from the coffee stains, because it'll change the shape a little bit. It looks a little more natural, a little aged. If you don't want your paint to run at all, you want to dry it before you add the spots. So if you decided to add coffee and you don't want it to start to look like this, like it runs a little bit and it's different layers of opaqueness, and you want to make sure you dry it before you put the spots on. I kind of like them, each one, to look a little different. This red is really pretty for the holidays. All right. And you can do a lot of spots if you like. You could do a mixture of large and small spots. But for me, I think this is good. You can look at your mushroom at the end too. And if you made some spots and you want them to be a little bit brighter, you can go over them again. This eraser stamp technique, I find that works really well. All right. So I'm happy with the way that looks. And this is all you need to do to paint the spots on your mushrooms and antique them. Now you're going to let it dry completely. And once your mushrooms are dry, you can leave them as they are. I think they're beautiful just like this. But I'm going to show you in the last step how to embellish the mushrooms with some glitter and some other things. So let's let this one dry and we'll get ready for the next step. This is step 5, and in this step, we'll be finishing and embellishing our mushrooms. For me, this is really the most fun part. We've done all the hard work of creating our beautiful mushrooms, and now we can take them to the next level by adding some tiny little details and personalizations that make them really special. I'm going to show you a couple different ways that I like to use them. So this is a mushroom that was made with a darker brown cotton. And then I used a piece of the pewter colored ribbon, added a name tag, and I'm using it here as a package topper. So this is a really beautiful way to finish a package for the holidays. And you can also add an ornament hook to this mushroom if you like, so that will become a gift in itself. Next to it, I have a little spun cotton egg in a tinsel nest, and I used a piece of antique sheet music to wrap the gift. And this is just a little piece of evergreen that I trimmed from a tree in my yard, and I use the glitter, the mica and glass glitter blend that came in the kit to frost it so it looks like it has a nice icy coating. This is a really nice way to use the mushrooms. Put that up there. Here again are some of the other mushrooms that I've done in the two different colors. You can see for these here, I've added a little bit of mica glitter to the base. On the red mushrooms, I added some of the faux moss, and some of them have some name tags. I put ribbons on all of them. You have the green and then the pewter ribbon. And on the caps, I did add a little bit more mica. These, I think, would be beautiful on any holiday dinner table as a place card holder. So you can put that at everybody's place setting, and then they can take this home as a gift. It's a really special way to remember your celebration and your get together. Again, you can use these as a package topper, an ornament. You can make them into a garland, whatever you can think of, really. I've put them on a wreath. If you have a glass cloche, you can make a little vignette with mushrooms inside, or even just put them in a bowl on your table. I think they're just really pretty no matter what you do with them. So here's our red spotted mushroom that we've been working on throughout the video. It's totally dry and it's ready to decorate. And I think for this one, I'm going to make a tag. And to make the tags, what I've included in the kit is a piece of cotton felt, is what I call it. Really, it's just a piece of cotton batting that has been saturated with glue wash and then dried, and it will become stiff. And then I've cut it into these pieces. These are 2 inches long and 3/8 inch wide. And to make the different names, you could write it by hand if you have nice handwriting, but I'm going to use some stamps. So I'm going to use, I have this little box of alphabet stamps. And for this one, I think I'm just going to write something. I'm going to write joy. I'll use this as a Christmas ornament. So there's a J. I'm going to use all capitals. O and Y. So you can use this for people's names to personalize ornaments or gift toppers, place card holders, or just write whatever you like. And I'm going to use black ink. You could use any kind of ink you like. I like to stamp the word or name before I cut it. Now that we have our stamps picked out, I'm going to show you how I like to place the words or names on here. I like to leave a little bit of room so I can trim the top into this sort of ticket shape and then apply it with the push pin. Just leave a little bit of space for that. So keep that in mind. And for the ends, I like to trim this little notch into it. I think it just adds a little detail that makes it a little more interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and you can look at this. There's kind of sometimes one side is a little bit smoother than the other. So try to choose the smoother side or just the side that you like better to stamp on. And here's the J. You might want to test this out on a piece of paper first. I'm just going to do the best that I can right now. You can use a different color ink if you want to use a gold ink. That's really pretty. Or write it by hand. All right. Okay, we've got joy. I'm going to move the ink pad out of the way. And now I don't need it to be so long. If you wanted to keep your length, you could just make the notches there, but I'm going to cut it down a little bit. And just cut a little triangle out of the bottom. If it helps you to mark that out with pencil first, you can. And for the top, I just trim off the edges. Try to make it equal. And again, you can mark that with pencil if you like. So that's how you make the tags. And before we apply this, I'm going to finish off the mushroom. And before we put the tag or anything else on, I think I'm going to make this one into an ornament. You can do the glitter first and then add the ornament hook, but I'm going to add it now. And to make an ornament hook, I'm going to use a piece of wire. You can use any type of wire that you might have that's thin. This is a 24 gauge annealed wire. And I'm just going to cut a little piece off with a wire cutter. Now I'm going to use my clay needle again and just bend it over. and make a little U shape and see what that looks like. Now that we have that, I'm going to poke 2 holes that are just about the same distance apart as these are. If it helps you to pick this up, you can cut a little bit off, make sure it's nice and equal before you do this. That way you can press it onto here with a little bit of paint or even some of the ink. Sometimes you can just make a couple indents and you can see right where the holes need to be made. So I'm going to make 2 holes with my clay needle. So now that I have the ornament hook made, I'm going to need to attach it. And for that, I'm going to be using a little bit of gel super glue. I'm going to open it up right over this little dish so I don't make a mess with it. And squeeze a little bit out. There we are. I'm going to pick this up and just lightly dip the tips into the super glue and press that down into the mushroom. Okay, so you can see what that looks like. You can make the hook as big or as small as you'd like. If you have an old ornament hook, they work really well for this as well. Just something that you would attach like a Christmas ball to your tree with. You can cut them and bend them and use them as well. If you don't want to attach wire, you can also just use a needle and thread and sew right through the top and make a loop that way. So this is one way to make an ornament hook. I'm going to move that aside. And for the red mushrooms, I like to add some moss to the base. So I'm going to use the moss here. This is what came in the kit. This is an artificial moss that's made from cotton. You could use real preserved moss if you like, if you don't have any of this, but I think this looks pretty nice. If you want to, you can always paint this a little bit. I've added a little bit of coffee to some of it. I'll show you on these mushrooms here. I don't know if you can really tell, but I did add a little bit of coffee and darker paint to kind of age it a little bit before I applied it. So you can do that. And you don't really need very much of it. I find you just need like a tiny little bit. I'm going to cut that off like that. And then I'm going to use my glue, which is the glue with a little bit of water in it. You could use straight glue for this, but I have this out already. So I'm just going to go ahead and just put a little bit on. And put it on like that. However you like, really, as much or as little as you want. You don't have to use it. I think that it's pretty cute. It adds a nice touch, especially to the red ones. And now I'm going to also add a little bit of glitter to this. This is the glitter blend that came in the kit. It's a mixture of mica flake and ground mica and a little bit of glass glitter that's fine ground. And again, I'm going to use this glue. I just want a little bit. I like a really light frosting of glitter. You could put glitter just on the spots if you wanted to make glittered spots, but I like a really light frosting, and I like to have more towards the top in the center, so it looks kind of like it's just a little dusting of snow almost. I do it like that, and I'm going to start with a cap. I'm going to put some on the stem also, and then just a little bit. You really don't need a lot to make an impression with that. You could put the glitter on the stem before you add the moss if you like, but I'm just going to add a little bit now as well. I think it's pretty to put it on the base of the stem. And for that, I'm just going to kind of tap it into the glitter. There we go. And then just tap it off. So you can see what this is looking like right now. I'm going to put the glitter aside, and you want to let this dry. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to cut a piece of ribbon. And we have 2 different ribbons that came in the kit. These are hand dyed 1/4 inch wide silk ribbon. And I've just dyed these with some fabric dye. This one is an ombre of sort of a pewter color and a little bit of taupe. And then I've aged it in coffee. And then this is a nice kind of soft silvery green. That's an ombre as well. So you can choose whichever color you like. I think since this one's going to be a Christmas ornament and it's a little more festive, I'm going to use green for it. I'll show you the different looks here with this. you can see that this is the same green ribbon, but there's variation on it. And I really like the way the green looks with the brown. There's some of the pewter color with the brown that's pretty too. And here is the red with the pewter color. And this is, since it's ombre, you get some nice variation there. There is like the darker area of the ribbon. This is the lighter area. So you can choose an area on the ribbon that you really like. So if you want to add the ribbon and make a bow about this size for these mushrooms, this is a 10-inch piece of ribbon. So I'm going to cut myself a 10-inch piece of ribbon. We have this here, and I'm going to use the green. Just measure out about 10 inches. Just cut that. You're probably going to want to wait for your mushroom to dry a little bit longer with the glitter and the moss. I didn't really wait quite as long as I normally would, but it's ready enough. So this is my 10-inch piece of ribbon, and I want to decide where I want the bow. Each side is a little bit different looking, and since I put the moss on more on this side, I think I'm going to put the bow right here. You don't have to use the ribbon or make a bow if you don't want to, but this is part's easy. You just tie a bow, try to keep the tails even. If you want your ribbon to be smoother, you can iron it. This silk ribbon does kind of crinkle up a bit, which I really like the look of that because it looks like it's older and it's been around for a while. Okay. So just adjust the bow how you like it. If you're working with the silk ribbon, keep in mind that it's really delicate. So if you tug, you will start to get some snags in it. So you want to tug it lightly, but enough to secure the knot. And now I'm just going to trim the ends just a tad on an angle just to make it a little more finished looking. Okay. And then here we have the tag that we made earlier. I'm going to use these pins. These are just kind of like a sewing pin, but they're only a 1/2 inch long. And this is a bronze color that I found. They actually come in many different colors. I have some gold, some silver, but I really like this bronze. So this is just a bronze straight pin with a pearlized head, and it's a 1/2 inch long. And I really like the way they look to attach the tags. So I'm just going to put it in like that and just press it in as deep as you want. And then that's the way that I like to attach the tags. So here we have one version of a finished mushroom. This one I've added the ornament hook to, the ribbon, the tag, and we have some glitter and moss. So this is just one way that you can finish the mushrooms. You can really get creative with it and have fun, customize them however you like. And whatever you decide to do with them, I think they add a really nice, special handmade touch to your holidays. We've reached the end of our project and our mushrooms are finished. I hope that you've learned some new techniques and enjoyed our time crafting together. I would love to see your creations, so please share them on social media and don't forget to tag me at Full Moon Wares. If you are interested in my other craft along tutorials or my one-of-a-kind pieces, please visit my shop. Thank you again, Lisa.